Hi everyone, this is a short screencast for Independent Colleges Dublin covering Chapter 25, Withholding Tax of the F6 Taxation BPP text. And what I'm going to be looking here at in this particular screencast is just three key areas of withholding tax, starting with subcontractors tax. Okay, so subcontractors tax, where does it come into play? Well, essentially, the area is between a principal contractor and a subcontractor. So in essence, what we're saying is that a subcontractor is providing work or providing services to a principal contractor, and that is known in the legislation and indeed within tax law as a relevant contract, and this tax is often referred to as relevant contract tax. So essentially what we have is just simply a relationship between a contractor and a subcontractor in relation to a relevant contract. So what happens? Well, essentially we are going to have a series of deductions at relevant percentages. So in essence, what we're saying is that if there is a relationship between a principal contractor and a subcontractor, and therefore there is a relevant contract, then one of these rates of tax is going to be deducted by the principal contractor before payments are made over to the subcontractor. So in essence, what's happening is that the revenue are trying to sort of manage situations where perhaps they feel that there's an element of risk with these individuals. In other words, that the individuals are perhaps not registered for tax or perhaps not up to date with their tax affairs, etc. So really what this is, it's a way of enabling the revenue to arrange for the principal contractor to really collect tax in advance of the contractor submitting returns, etc. Okay, so what you'll see is that there's several possible rates. Okay, and you may notice this little character down here and the one on the left hand side here. Essentially what we're saying is that these rates are graded. Yeah, so depending upon the past tax history of the subcontractor, it may well be that if they have a good tax history, then the rate that at which the tax is deducted is zero. Therefore, in effect, no deductions at all. On the converse side, where we have an individual perhaps who has a poor tax record, let's say that they have been submitting returns late or not paying their tax, or perhaps they're not even registered in any way for self-employment. In that particular case, the revenue will provide for a deduction of 35%. So really the principal contractor is guided by the revenue in relation to the rates to be deducted. And really, as you would expect, the tax deducted is paid over periodically to the revenue and therefore held on account in respect of the contractor. Okay, so aside from the essence of who and why and how much, the areas of concern are in the main construction. In other words, this applies, or these rules apply to the construction industry, and that would be, I would suspect, the bulk of the tax that the revenue collects under these methods would be for individual contractors or indeed subcontractors involved in the construction industry. But in addition to that, there are two other areas, forestry and indeed meat processing. So in essence, what we're saying is that it is only in these industries that this issue of subcontractor withholding tax would be relevant. It wouldn't be relevant outside of these industries. So in essence there, in summary, what we have is really for the individual subcontractor a tax credit of some kind, and we're familiar with how to use tax credits in income tax computations. In essence, they will be deducted at the end of the comp, and obviously this is a refundable tax credit because it's actual tax that has been deducted from earnings at one of these levels. Okay, So in essence, that really is the nuts and bolts of subcontractors tax, and the way that I've seen this sort of manifest itself in the main in F6 taxation IRE questions is just really that some income for the individual will be thrown in, and you will see that some tax has been deducted, and you will simply have to either include the income if it hasn't been included, or note the fact that it's already included in their self-employed income, and obviously take account of the tax credit, and obviously deduct it at the end of the income tax computation. Okay, so that's the essence of subcontractor tax. We'll just sort of move on now to professional services withholding tax, which is sort of not dissimilar, aside from the fact that there is just really one rate. There's one rate. There's a 20% rate. And this particular rate, and this is something that we very much have to rote learn, this rate is only relevant to professional services, whatever they are, provided to these types of government agencies or indeed government departments. And that should be fairly obvious from the question. Okay, so in essence, what we're saying is that where we have individuals, perhaps a doctor or an accountant, etc., excuse me, who's providing professional services to these departments, once the payments are being made over to the individual, 20% must be deducted. It must be deducted in all cases. So in terms of the areas, I've just picked out a couple for you here. There are a variety, but in essence, just think professionals, doctors and lawyers, but you'll also have accountants, perhaps engineers, architects, etc., etc. So in essence, what we're saying is that where these types of services are provided to these types of government department, then 20% is going to be deducted at source, and obviously then that will follow through in the same way as subcontractors tax and be a tax credit at the end of the income tax computation. Okay, so really in summary here, what you'll see, just as we saw above, really what we're saying is that all that this does is create a tax credit for the individual, which is going to be deducted at the end of the income tax computation. And again, the way that I've seen this manifest itself in F6 questions is in a fairly straightforward manner, in the sense that information will be given in respect of earnings from a particular government department. Now, one has to establish whether or not those earnings are included in the figures that you're given. In other words, they may give a certain figure and then say, in addition to that, these further earnings had a tax deduction of 20%. So just be careful on that. In terms of the tax credit side, very straightforward. It's a refundable credit that will be shown at the bottom of the computation, and we're thought at F6 we're talking about a half a mark or possibly even a mark, just simply for including that 20% value. Okay. Last point here is just in relation to withholding of income tax generally. So in essence, what we're talking about is very much the same type of thing. In what circumstances is income tax deducted at source? And we saw above we have two examples in relation to subcontractors and professional services. Well, a couple of other areas. One is this area of a non-resident landlord. So there's a requirement for anyone paying rent to a non-resident landlord to deduct tax at 20%. In addition, with patent royalties, we'll know that hopefully that 20% is deducted at source unless it's payments between group companies. And in addition to that, probably a small point here that you may not have seen elsewhere, just this idea of interest being paid to another person in respect of a loan. And again, there's a requirement to deduct 20%. So, I could perhaps see that as an add-on question in F6 for perhaps 2 or 3 marks, just to perhaps to outline what instances are there where withholding of income tax is required, perhaps outside subcontractor tax and professional services. So we have 3 there. So really that's a summary for you of this chapter 25 of the F6 BPP text in relation to subcontractors, professional services, withholding tax, and indeed withholding of income tax generally. So I hope that helps, and good luck with your studies.